Coming up on this week's edition of Sunday Nation, Plymouth Township Supervisor Heise is here to talk to me about the water debt crisis in Highland Park and the water infrastructure crisis here in Michigan. Is the state of Michigan demonstrating a sense of urgency to address the water infrastructure crisis facing Michigan, especially at a time when the state is sitting upon billions of dollars in surplus money? And of course, my visit to Selma, Alabama this week to join my dear friend and civil rights hero, Dr. Bernard Lafayette, as the city of Selma observes the Dr. Bernard Lafayette Day this week. And of course, my remarks regarding the installation of Dr. Faith Brooks, the beloved daughter of the late Bishop Pierre Brooks, to the new role of jurisdictional supervisor for the Church of God in Christ. It's all coming up on this week's edition of Sunday Nation. Stay with us. Welcome back to Sunday Nation as the policy battle rages on regarding Highland Park's water debt and, of course, consequently, the future of water infrastructure here in Michigan. Joining us to talk about that is Heise, who is the Township Supervisor for Plymouth Township. Court, in fact, sent me an email in reference to one of my columns in the Detroit News making the case for Highland Park. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You know, and so let's begin with the allocation here. $20 million for Highland Park. You've been involved with conversations with Great Lakes. I'll get to that. But just your take here, because I know I got your email. You agreed with my position that, in fact, the state should intervene in Highland Park.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is the kind of opportunity that all of that federal ARPA money, that American Rescue Plan money that we got as a result of COVID, this is where that money really should be targeted. It's where it should be going. Public health, safety, infrastructure. This is the kind of thing that the state should be prioritizing, and Highland Park is a good example of where that kind of infrastructure investment is needed.
It's interesting you say that, because when we talk about public health, sometimes we don't connect the essence of water to public health. Yeah. Because you can't live without water.
Exactly, and so public health and water are totally combined. We saw that with the Flint crisis, obviously.
That is true.
So this is the
Benton Harbor as well.
Benton Harbor, and we don't want that kind of thing happening here. Nobody wants that. I think this is a great opportunity for the state to assist Highland Park in this transition period that they're going to be going through.
Yeah, but do you get a sense that, in fact, that there is a sense of urgency here from the state? I feel like the state is moving in bits and pieces when they're called upon to, or when they're called on the carpet to do so.
Yeah, I mean, right now I don't detect that sense of urgency in the legislature, and I'm a former legislator myself, so I can kind of pick up on these things. But it's a case right now where I think it has to be the folks back here in Southeast Michigan, the media, the folks in Highland Park, people like me, who also have an interest in the outcome here. So I think it's just incumbent on all of us to keep the pressure on the state and get them to make that investment. Yeah.
So let's get into the debt here. Highland Park has $24 million, $20 million obviously. But even before that, I want to get your reaction though. When Faye Bay-Dune received, you know, she's an ally of the governor, support of Democratic politics and so forth. When she received $20 million of taxpayer money for a nonprofit that was not set up yet, when the funds were being allocated, and only set it up 10 days after $20 million was allocated for the nonprofit. Now, we're not saying $20 here, $20 million, that is a lot of money, Mr. Heise.
Yeah. No, it totally is, and we've seen other examples closer to home where I live. In Salem Township, we had Bobby Shostak, the former chair of the Michigan Republican Party, very well connected, very powerful developer. He's received $35 million to build 3,000 homes and retail and businesses in Salem Township, which is just to the west of me. I mean, these priorities just seem out of whack when I've got infrastructure problems throughout the state of Michigan, not just Flint, obviously Highland Park, Benton Harbor, but also in the city of Detroit and other places.
Yeah.
And to me, that federal money, that ARPA money, those billions and billions of dollars that we all received, that's where that money should be targeted. And that's the point that I think you and I share on that.
Well, you know, and the other thing too, and I keep reading this, that the state is sitting on a surplus of billions. So what is it going to do with that money? And there is an infrastructure need here. And I said last week that Highland Park is a case study of infrastructure.
Well, it's a great place to make that investment. And right now, I see money going towards a lot of really frivolous projects in individual state rep districts and state senate districts. And yeah, that happens. But wow, we've got to look at the big picture and say, where can this money really be spent? Not on a curling arena in Traverse City, but can we spend it on people who really need it, where that money was intended for, and put that to the best use possible, again, for public health, safety, and infrastructure improvement.
Let's get into Great Lakes here, and I'll come to infrastructure later on a statewide, though, because I think infrastructure is an issue that is actually should be nonpartisan, you know. You don't have to be a Democrat, Republican, or Libertarian to support infrastructure.
Right.
It affects, you know, every community. But with Highland Park's water debt, you said there is also another debt here with I want to get into the mechanism of the Great Lakes Water Authority here. You've been in conversation. You're on the table. You're on the table with them.
Well, when I was a state representative, so I was state representative for Plymouth, Northville, and Eastern Canton from 2011 through 2016. And so during that time, we all voted in favor of the grand bargain for the city of Detroit. And at that time, I was advocating for a true regional authority that would take over both the water and the sewer systems. I obviously did not get my way because the federal judges intervened. So Judge Rosen, Judge Rhodes, and Judge Cox, federal judges, I mean, they met with me and they said, no, we're doing it our way. We're going to just take the judicial initiative to create the Great Lakes Water Authority. So typically, authorities should be going through the state legislature. So we as legislators wanted to have that ability to formulate what that authority would look like. We never had that chance. So it's a 7-member board. There's appointees from the 3 counties, the city of Detroit, the governor. And you know, I think most of them do a good job, but the lack of transparency we're already seeing with this whole allocation. We're all paying. I'm paying for the Highland Park debt right now. That's the overall debt we believe is about $54 million. $54 million.
Well, the mayor of Highland Park, Glenda McDonald, was on this show last week, and you watched some of that. She indicated that in fact it's not only $24 million. There is more debt. But go ahead.
I'm not surprised, but we as all of the customer communities of the Great Lakes Water Authority, we are all paying some share of the $24 million that we keep hearing about in the media. Now, for my community, Plymouth Township, it's about $185,000. That's been my allocation so far. City of Detroit, it's been about $1.6 million. City of Dearborn, because of the way that the water is metered, it's complicated. Their assessment was $3.6 million. You know, so who's going to make them whole in this whole thing? So we have to look at not only helping Highland Park out of this legal problem that they're in, we've got to address the long-term infrastructure issues, but we also need to make the communities whole too. That's me, that's Detroit, that's just about everybody.
So on the Great Lakes Water Authority here, can they break down this debt for you?
They can try to.
Because you said you're uneasy about, quote unquote, what you view as their lack of transparency.
Yeah, well, we've got a better handle than we did a couple of years ago because we just kind of found out about this through trial and error. It was never told to us. These assessments, and I call them assessments because the Great Lakes Water Authority was losing in court. Highland Park was winning in court. And I heard your interview with the mayor. And she's right for those moments in time. She did have judges agreeing with Highland Park, and I don't dispute that. But during that time, Highland Park was winning, Great Lakes Water Authority was losing, and their costs were being passed on to us, the ratepayers. So we did not know that this was happening until basically our people caught it, and that's what set this whole thing in motion. So, like, for example, my assessments every year at Plymouth Township are about $15,000. We have not paid that for the last 2 years. We've withheld that payment, and most communities in western Wayne County have withheld that. Now, I know Macomb County has gone their own way. They've engaged in some of the litigation. We just chose not to do that.
But and even I think with the levies and the assessment as it relates to the water debt, even in Highland Park, when you talk to people in Highland Park, they even dispute that because it's up for debate in terms of just the operation or the modus operandi of the Great Lakes Water Authority.
Yeah. Well, it's right now.
I mean, is the Great Lakes Water Authority here the problem, as opposed to this community?
There's a lot of problems. There's a lot of problems. Yeah. So first of all, for the time being, Highland Park has lost in court. Yeah. They have this assessment, a levy against them.
Right.
$24 million. They have to pay that back to GLWA. Yeah. Highland Park still wants to someday provide their own water supply. They used to back in the good old days. Right. They drew water from the Detroit River. They had it in a reservoir. Right. And those days are over. So they've, part of my, if I were in charge, I would say, let's have Highland Park be a full-fledged member of GLWA, just like me. You got to abandon the idea of providing your own water supply. It's way too expensive. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't recommend it for anybody, especially nowadays, given all of the regulatory issues and the public health concerns. So you have to abandon that, be a full-fledged member of GLWA, and abandon the litigation. The lawsuits have got to stop. These lawsuits, in some cases, go back, I think, to the 1940s. And the litigation's got to stop. And then, at the same time, the state of Michigan's got to help out Highland Park, clean up the system. Literally, it's a leaky system.
Well, but
there's a lot of waste.
But that's where the issue. That's also a bulk of the issue here. The infrastructure problem here that is embodied in the Highland Park water crisis, which I feel like it's not been talked about. I don't see the Great Lakes Water Authority drilling on that issue. I think much of the debate so far has been around the 24 million, but beneath it, it's almost like a whitewashed grave, right? It's nice on the outside, inside it stinks. Yeah. Beneath it is a larger problem here. Yeah. And the issue is, Mr. Heise, does the state recognize that? Does the Great Lakes Water Authority recognize that, hey, okay, we got this, but there's a bigger issue here?
Yeah. Well, I think the state has recognized it in the past when Highland Park was under an emergency manager. Right. And I know we can debate that law all day, but it is what it is. And during that time, frankly, the Snyder administration said to Highland Park, we're going to fix your reservoir. We're going to fix your own water system. It never happened. I mean, that promise was never kept. Right. But we're at a critical time right now with the money and the money is available. Yes. The lawsuits for now should be set aside. Right. Let's take this opportunity to spend the money the way it was intended, to fix the infrastructure. It's a leaky system. It leaks. The metering system, I've been told, is very inadequate. It's not accurate. We're not getting, we don't know what's being used.
Mayor McDonald made mention of some of that. Let's go on a quick break. We'll be right back with Plymouth Township Supervisor and, of course, former State Rep Court Heise here on Sunday Nation, deconstructing the infrastructure, the water infrastructure crisis here in Michigan. We'll be right back.